A little girl was abandoned in a dump by her stepmother, who only wanted to get her hands on her father's fortune. In the middle of the storm, shivering from the cold and with her body weakened, she knew she had nowhere to run. Her fate that night seemed sealed, and Sophia believed that no one would come to her rescue. But she was wrong. In the place where she should have found only darkness, there was a man, and what he did to the little girl will leave you speechless. The rain was falling, hard, hammering the roof of the mansion where it all began. The window glass was fogged by the hot steam inside, while thunder echoed in the distance. In the dark room, a 12-year-old girl, curled up in bed, held to her chest the last gift she had received from her father, a delicate and shiny party dress that no longer made any sense that night. Her trembling fingers glided over a silver tiara at her side, while her breathing became shorter and shorter. Something was happening. Something she could not name, but that tightened her chest as if it were a warning. In the hallway, raised voices cut through the silence of the house. "Ernesto, you're making a mistake," Camilla said, in a honeyed tone, but full of venom. "She's already old enough to understand that life isn't a fairy tale. It's time to stop spoiling her." Sophia shrank even more. Ever since that woman had appeared in their lives, everything had changed. Her father was no longer the same. The strong and respected businessman now seemed like a shadow of himself, weak, sick, more tired every day. And even though no one could explain what was happening, Sophia felt it. She could feel it in Camilla's gaze, in her cold smiles, and in the words she said when she thought no one was listening. There was something terribly wrong in that house. The bedroom door opened slowly, creaking as if warning that something bad was about to happen. Sophia held her breath. Her father appeared in the doorway, but he was no longer the strong and imposing man she remembered. Ernesto was haggard, pale, his eyes sunken as if the weight of something invisible was sucking the life out of him. But even so, he smiled at his daughter. "My princess." His voice came out weak, broken. "I'm sorry for not making your day better." Sophia ran to hug him, feeling how much smaller he seemed, how much more fragile, how much faster time was passing him by. But she knew it wasn't just time. It wasn't just the mysterious illness. Something was wrong. Her heart screamed it with each new symptom. With each night, her father seemed worse than the day before. "Daddy, what's wrong with you?" She looked deep into his eyes, searching for a truth he didn't want to say. Ernesto tried to smile but failed. His weak fingers caressed his daughter's face, as if he wanted to engrave her image in his memory before it was too late. "Don't worry, my little one. I'm just tired. I'll be better soon." Lie. Sophia knew. The sparkle in his eyes was gone. Her father had always been a man of firm posture, of sure words. Now everything about him seemed uncertain, and deep down she felt that he knew the truth too. He just didn't want to say it out loud. The sound of heels echoed down the hallway, getting closer. Sophia felt a shiver run down her spine before she even saw her. Camilla entered the room with the same expression as always, a soft smile on her perfectly painted lips, but her eyes cold as steel. Camilla placed her hand on Ernesto's shoulder, squeezing it lightly, as if she were just offering support. But Sophia noticed there was something in the way her fingers dug into his skin, an invisible control, a silent reminder of who was in charge. "Ernesto, you need to rest," she said, her voice sweet as honey, but filled with something that made Sophia's skin crawl. Sophia is a young lady now. She understands that her father can't wear himself out like that. Ernesto's gaze wavered. He nodded slowly and tried to stand, but his knees gave out. Camilla caught him before he fell, her movements precise, almost rehearsed. "Come on, honey. You need to sleep." She gave Sophia a quick glance. a look that said everything without needing words. Sophia watched as Camilla led her father out of the room, his arm thrown over her shoulders like a dead weight. The girl's heart hammered in her chest. Something inside her screamed to run, to stop him from leaving, but she didn't know how. The door closed, leaving Sophia alone in the dark room. The storm outside continued to rage, thunder tearing through the sky as if the world was trying to warn her of something. She approached the window, looking beyond the fogged glass. The shadows of the night moved across the garden, distorted by the rain. The reflection of her own face in the glass stared back at her, the red eyes, the disheveled hair, the expression of someone who was about to lose everything. Then something caught her attention. In the hallway, behind the closed door, whispered voices. Camilla was talking quietly to someone. "It's almost done. 1 or 2 more shots, and he won't be a problem anymore." Sophia felt her blood run cold. She held her breath, pressing her ear to the door. Her heart was beating so hard that she was afraid the sound would give her presence away. What did Camilla mean by that? 1 or 2 more shots? Of what? "Make sure everything is ready tomorrow. I want this over with quickly," continued the stepmother's voice, cold, without a trace of emotion. The ground seemed to disappear beneath Sophia's feet. She didn't understand everything, but she knew one thing. Her father was getting worse, and Camilla was behind it. She had to do something. But what? Who would believe her? He could barely stand, and what if it got even worse? What if Camilla was planning something for that night? Sophia stepped away from the door, tears stinging her eyes. She wanted to run to her father's room, wake him up, scream for him to run away, but she knew he wouldn't be able to. And Camilla would never allow it. Fear mixed with despair. Sophia looked around the room, trying to think of something, anything. But what could a 12-year-old girl do against a woman like Camilla? Against someone who smiled while plotting her own husband's death? Her eyes fell on the small silver tiara beside the bed, a gift from her father, a symbol of happier times. Her throat tightened. She couldn't just wait to see what would happen. She had to act. But before she could come up with a plan, the doorknob turned. Sophia froze. Camilla walked into the room slowly, as if she had all the time in the world. Her smile was intact, but her eyes said something else, something dark, something dangerous. "Darling," Camilla said, her voice too sweet, "I have a special surprise for you. Something that will make this night unforgettable." Sophia felt a shiver run down her spine. Something in the way Camilla looked at her made her stomach churn. The girl swallowed, hard, trying to stay calm. "What kind of surprise?" he asked, his voice coming out weaker than he intended. Camilla tilted her head slightly, her smile widening. "The kind a little princess like you deserves. Grab your jacket. Let's go for a walk." The rain outside was relentless. Lightning lit up the sky, casting distorted shadows across the hallway. Sophia instinctively looked out the window. The garden was dark, wet. Her heart told her not to go, not to trust. "But it's raining a lot," he murmured, trying to gain time. Camilla let out a small laugh, almost amused. "Don't worry, dear. That won't be a problem. Your father is asleep, and I promised I would do something special for you. You don't want to disappoint him, do you?" Sophia hesitated. The mention of her father was like a blow. He was so weak. What if he really believed that Camilla was doing something good for her? But at the same time, everything in her screamed that this woman had no good intentions. Even so, the girl nodded slowly, picking up her jacket. Camilla smiled happily and gestured for her to follow her. Her eyes shone in the dark, cold as the night outside. The car slid through the wet streets, cutting through the curtain of rain that fell mercilessly. Sophia was in the back seat, huddled, her hands nervously clutching the sleeves of her jacket. The city lights were getting further and further away. The silence inside the vehicle was suffocating. Camilla drove calmly, her long, well-kept fingers tapping lightly on the steering wheel. Every now and then she glanced in the rearview mirror, watching Sophia with an almost imperceptible smile on her lips. "Where are we going?" Sophia finally asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Camilla didn't answer right away. She made a small detour to the left, entering a more remote road where there were no more houses, just empty lots and abandoned warehouses. "Patience, my dear," she replied, in a tone that sent shivers down Sophia's spine. "The best surprises are the ones we don't expect." The girl's heart beat faster. The darkness around her grew denser. There was no more traffic, no more people. Just the storm, the roar of the engine, and that growing feeling that something terrible was about to happen. The paved road disappeared, giving way to a bumpy dirt path. The car shook, but Camilla continued driving with the same frightening calm. Sophia looked out the window. What had once been buildings and lights were now just shadows and mud. The smell in the air changed. It was a heavy, damp, rotten odor. Sophia's stomach churned. She didn't know where they were, but one thing was certain. This was no place for a surprise. Camilla stopped the car suddenly. The sound of rain hitting the roof was the only thing that broke the tense silence. Without looking at Sophia, the stepmother turned off the engine and opened the driver's door. "Come," he said without emotion. Sophia hesitated. Her whole body screamed at her not to leave, not to move. But Camilla's cold hand grabbed her arm, pulling her out of the car with force. The girl stumbled in the mud, feeling the cold wind cut through her skin. She looked around, her heart racing. Mountains of trash rose up all around her. Rainwater mixed with the dirty ground, forming dark puddles. A dump. The smell was unbearable. Sophia covered her nose with the sleeve of her jacket, but it was no use. The rotten odor seemed to stick to her skin, to her clothes. Her shoes sank into the mud, mixed with food scraps and torn plastic. She looked at Camilla, her heart pounding. For the first time, there was no more pretense on her stepmother's face. The fake smile was gone. In its place was only coldness. "You know, Sophia," Camilla said, looking around, as if she was admiring the landscape, "you've always been a problem for me since day one." Fear tightened the girl's throat. The tone of her voice had changed. It was no longer sweet, no longer fake. It was real. It was cruel. "Your father, oh, your dear father," Camilla continued, finally looking at her, "always so busy spoiling you, protecting you." He never realized what was happening right before his eyes. Sophia felt her legs weaken. She started to take a step back, but Camilla was quicker. She grabbed her arm tightly, her fingers digging into her skin. "Have you ever wondered why your father got sick so suddenly?" Camilla whispered, bringing her face close to Sophia's. The girl's eyes widened. A cold shiver ran down her spine. No, it couldn't be. Each dose a little weaker, each day a little closer to the end. And him, always trusting me. So predictable, so easy. Camilla laughed softly as if she found it funny. Sophia felt a lump tighten in her throat. The pieces began to fit together. The tea that Camilla always prepared, the medicines she insisted on giving her father, the weakness, the tiredness, the doctors without answers. "What did you do to him?" Sophia's voice came out almost as a whisper, a thread of air caught between despair and disbelief. Camilla tilted her head, a wicked glint in her eyes. "I did what was necessary, and now I just need to get rid of one more problem." Panic took hold of Sophia. She tried to pull her arm away, but Camilla's grip tightened. Her smile disappeared, giving way to an impatient expression. "Don't make this any harder than it needs to be, darling," he said, with false tenderness in his voice. Sophia looked around. Piles of trash, torn bags, pieces of broken furniture. No one around, no one to hear her scream. Camilla pulled the girl hard, dragging her a few steps forward. The ground was slippery, and Sophia stumbled, almost falling. Her knees sank into the mud. "You should be grateful," Camilla continued, impassive. "At least I'm letting it all end quickly." Sophia felt despair take over her chest. Her eyes filled with tears. She needed to run away. She needed to do something. But Camilla was stronger, faster, and worst of all, there was no one there to help her. Sophia fought. She struggled with all her strength, kicking and scratching, but Camilla was stronger. Her stepmother grabbed her by the shoulders and pushed her back, making her fall onto a pile of wet trash. The impact knocked the air from her lungs. "How annoying," Camilla murmured, fixing her hair as if the situation were just a temporary inconvenience. "But it's time to put an end to this." She leaned over, grabbing Sophia by the collar of her jacket, pulling her up like a garbage bag. The girl tried to pull away, but her arms were weak, shaking with fear and exhaustion. It was then that Sophia saw it. On the floor, just a few inches from her hand, was a piece of broken glass. Time seemed to slow down. She knew this was her only chance. With a quick movement, she grabbed the shard of glass and, without thinking, ran the improvised blade through Camilla's arm. The stepmother screamed and immediately released Sophia. The girl didn't wait to see her reaction. She got up and ran. She ran like she had never run before. The rain beat down on her face as she ran through the middle of the dump, tripping over torn bags and slipping in the mud. Her heart was beating so fast it hurt, but she couldn't stop. Not now. Behind her, a furious scream tore through the night. "Come back here, you filthy rats!" Camilla was behind her. Sophia heard the heavy footsteps crushing the trash, the rapid breathing of her stepmother. She was faster, stronger. If she caught up with the girl, it would all be over. Sophia forced her legs to move faster. Her feet sank into the wet ground. Her hands trembled, but she kept going, dodging mountains of debris, jumping over piles of rotting wood. Then, in the midst of the darkness, he saw something that made his heart stop. A light. Sophia could hardly believe it. In the darkness and rain, a beam of light cut across the dump, swaying from side to side. Someone was there, her chest filled with a mixture of hope and despair. She wanted to scream, to call for help, but fear made her hesitate. If she screamed and wasn't fast enough, Camilla might catch her before she reached the light. But there was no other option. "Help!" Sophia screamed with all her might, her voice piercing the cold air. "Here!" The light paused for a moment, then began moving toward her. Heavy footsteps approached. A tall figure emerged from the shadows, holding a lantern. "What the—" The voice was that of a man, surprised and confused. His eyes widened as he saw the small, soaked and trembling figure before him. "My God! It's just a girl!" Sophia tried to run to the man, but her weak, soaked body wouldn't budge. Her legs gave out and she fell to her knees in the mud. The stranger ran toward her, crouching down beside her. Hey, calm down." His voice was firm but gentle. He seemed to not believe what he was seeing. "What are you doing here, child?" Before Sophia could respond, a new sound echoed through the dump. Footsteps, furious, fast. "Don't believe her." Camilla's voice came from behind them, full of false concern. "That girl ran away from home. She's scared." The man turned to look at Camilla, and in that instant Sophia knew she had seconds to act. "No!" she screamed, grabbing the sleeve of his coat. "Don't believe her. She wants to kill me." The man frowned, looking between Sophia and Camilla. His face hardened. "What's going on here?" he asked, his voice now more serious, suspicious. Camilla, always agile, changed her expression in the same instant. Her face took on a mask of despair, and fake tears welled up in her eyes. She's my stepdaughter, he said, taking a step forward. She's confused. She ran away from home. She doesn't know what she's saying. Please, sir, help me get her home safely. Sophia felt despair take over her. Camilla was good at this, good at deceiving, good at appearing innocent. If that man believed her, it would all be over. She had to make him see the truth, and there was only one way. Sophia took a deep breath, gathering every ounce of courage she had left inside her. With trembling hands, she pulled up the sleeve of her jacket, revealing the red marks on her arms. Camilla's fingers were still imprinted on her skin. "She brought me here to kill me," Sophia said, her voice firm even as tears streamed down her face. "My father is sick because she poisoned him, and now she wants to get rid of me too." The silence that followed was suffocating. The man looked at the bruises on Sophia's arms, and then back at Camilla. Something in his expression hardened. "Explain this," he said, his voice now cold and suspicious. Camilla opened her mouth, but for the first time she couldn't find the words. Control of the situation was slipping through her fingers, and she knew it. "You don't understand," he said, attempting one last act of manipulation. "She's lying. That girl is ungrateful. She's always been a problem." But it was at that moment that Sophia saw something behind the man. Lights. Not just the flashlight, but headlights, the sound of an engine approaching, and then sirens. Camilla turned pale. "No!" she screamed, backing away. "You ruined everything!" The man stepped forward, shielding Sophia behind him. Red and blue lights reflected off the piles of trash, illuminating the stepmother's pale face. Mud smeared her elegant dress, her perfect makeup now smudged by the rain. "It's over." The man's voice was firm. He looked at Sophia for a moment, and then turned his gaze back to Camilla. "The police will want to talk to you." Camilla tried to run, but there was nowhere left to run. 2 police officers got out of their cars with guns drawn. "Hands up," one of them ordered. And in that moment, Sophia finally knew she was saved. Camilla hesitated, her eyes moving frantically as if she could still find a way out. But it was too late. She raised her hands slowly, feeling defeat weigh down on her shoulders. 2 police officers stepped forward, quickly restraining her. She struggled, screamed, tried to protest, but no one was listening anymore. "You don't understand," he yelled as handcuffs were placed on his wrists. "I deserved this fortune. He was going to die anyway." Sophia watched everything, her body still trembling, her breathing quickened. She couldn't believe it. For so long she felt like no one would ever listen to her, that no one would ever believe her. But now, Camilla was trapped. The nightmare was over. The man who helped her crouched down beside her. "You're safe now, little girl," he said, his voice softer this time. "We're going to get you home." Sophia nodded, but the weight on her chest still hadn't lifted. Her father, he was still in danger. "My father," she whispered, grabbing the sleeve of the man's coat. "He's alone. She was poisoning him. We have to save him." The officer exchanged a quick glance with his colleague and reached for the radio strapped to his shoulder. "This is Unit 27. We need an urgent ambulance to Ernesto Vasconcellos' residence. Possible poisoning. Send a vehicle to make sure no one interferes." Sophia felt her legs weaken. After everything, after the fear, the running away, the lies, someone finally believed in her. The man placed his hand on her shoulder, firm but gentle. "We'll save him, Sophia. I promise." The drive to her father's house seemed endless. Sophia was in the back seat of the police car, wrapped in a dry blanket that one of the officers had given her. Her body was still shaking, not only from the cold, but from anxiety. The ambulance was already at the mansion's door when they arrived. Red and blue lights reflected off the windows, and paramedics hurried in and out. Sophia jumped out of the car before the police officer even opened the door for her. "My father, where is he?" he asked, his heart hammering in his chest. One of the doctors looked at her and came closer. "We've managed to stabilize him," he said in a calm voice. "But he's very weak. We're going to take him to the hospital right now. You can go with him." Sophia nodded frantically and ran into the ambulance. When she saw her father lying on the stretcher, so pale and fragile, the tears she had been holding back began to fall. Sophia held her father's hand gently, feeling how cold his skin was. His chest rose and fell slowly, his breathing shallow, but he was still there, alive. "Daddy, it's me." Her voice was choked. "You'll be okay, I promise." Ernesto's eyes opened slightly. He blinked a few times, in confusion, until his vision seemed to focus on his daughter. A small, faint smile appeared on his lips. "My princess," he whispered, his voice barely audible. The tears fell harder. For so long, she thought she would never hear that word again, that she would never feel her father's touch again. The paramedic adjusted the equipment around the stretcher. "Hold on tight, kiddo. Let's get him to the hospital and make sure he gets through this." The ride to the hospital was a blur. Sophia didn't let go of her father's hand for a second. The fear was still there, clinging to her chest, but now mixed with something new. Hope. When they arrived, the doctors rushed Ernesto into the emergency room. Sophia tried to follow them, but a kind nurse placed a hand on her shoulder. "We'll take care of your father, dear. He's in good hands now. You need to rest." But how could she rest? How could she stay still when everything inside her was spinning? Sophia felt as if she were trapped in a dream, where everything was happening too fast and at the same time too slow. Minutes turned into hours. She was sitting in a hard armchair in the reception area, hugging her legs, when she heard footsteps approaching. She looked up and saw the police officer who had rescued her from the dump. He bent down to her level and smiled slightly. "I have 2 pieces of news for you, Sophia. The first, your father is out of danger." Sophia felt the air return to her lungs. For the first time in a long time, she was able to breathe without fear. Her entire body relaxed, and the tears that came this time were not of fear, but of relief. "And the second news?" he asked, his voice weak, almost a whisper. The police officer crossed his arms and gave a satisfied smile. "Camilla is under arrest. She tried to make up a story, but we already have enough evidence against her. The doctors confirmed that her father was being slowly poisoned. And what's more, we found the bottles hidden in the house. She's not getting out of this." Sophia closed her eyes for a moment, letting that truth sink into her mind. The nightmare was over. Camilla could never hurt anyone again. "Can I see my father?" he asked, wiping his face with the sleeves of his jacket. The policeman nodded. "Of course. He's asking for you." Sophia stood up and walked down the white lighted hallway. Each step she took her away from the horror of that night and closer to the only place where she had ever felt safe. In the arms of his father. Quote of the day: "The truth can be hidden for a time, but never forever. Justice always finds its way." If this story kept you hooked from beginning to end, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave your like and activate notifications so you don't miss any exciting stories. Comment which city you're watching from. We want to know how far our stories reach. See you in the next video.